I wanted to use diversity to make it a global platform. And because we're home to so many different embassies and we have resources to designers around the world, it was our goal to be the Olympics of Fashion Week. We had to give a reason. Why would you do DC versus New York? Or why would you do DC in addition to New York? If you're already doing the world's biggest, we had to sell a different dream. And our dream was to get your country behind you. And that's important to a lot of it. Even if it's just the ambassadors there or the cultural attaches there or one of the leading publications that's associated with their country mentions their brand, that's really huge for them.
I'm Brandon Vaidyanathan, and this is Beauty at Work, a podcast about how beauty works in our world and shapes the work that we do. This episode is sponsored by Templeton Religion Trust and the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies at the University of Southern California. More about them later in the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so thrilled to have my guest here today, Mr. Ean Williams. He's a former National Security Agency intelligence analyst in the United States Air Force and a professional model and actor with America's Most Wanted, A Man Called Hawk, and Anacostia. He's also a multi-award-winning event producer and fashion designer of two labels, Magnum Underwear and Corjor International, using his two oldest sons' names, Corey and Jordan. He's also the founder and executive director of DC Fashion Week, a nonprofit organization, and the fifth largest growing fashion week in the United States, with 39 seasons under its belt. Ian, it's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Good afternoon, Brandon. I'm happy to be here.
Great. You had a great introduction to the power of fashion when you were a child. That I think helped draw you into this career. Could you tell us a little bit about how fashion became important to you even early on?
Well, for me as a child, it was just a matter of we were taught to just match. And back at this time, there was a brand by Sears. There were like Geranimals. Even when I would go in and shop with my parents, I knew if I matched the alligator with the alligator, it was a good fit, or the hippo with the hippo. So I learned early with matching clothes and colors and things like that. And I was pretty much just kept that going. It wasn't until I inherited some stepsisters who were older and a little more fashionable, and they gave me some choices. And what was the biggest impact was the difference that people responded to. And this was in junior high school. We call it junior high school. I know you all call it middle school now. And I couldn't get over all the commotion and attention that a change of clothes, the effect that it had. And I had to admit, as a teenager who was, nerdy, I liked it, and I wanted to continue that. I captured attention of, the popular girls in school that normally wouldn't have not said anything to me for the most part. And they all commented. And I was like, wow, clothes. I didn't probably put it in these words, but I saw the impact of how dressing affected, even from my teachers to my classmates and just in general. So I saw that impact.
That's great. Where did you grow up? And was fashion an important part of your family? Was that something that you mentioned your sisters, but was that something that was considered important in your household as you were growing up?
I don't know if they stressed the importance of fashion, but my mother was very fashionable. She liked to dress up. She was a self-professed beauty queen. So she liked to walk in the room and make a statement. So that was always her thing. My father was very cool. I remember specifically in, during that time period when I was like 7 or 8, some of the clothes that he wore, were flashy, and there were popular TV shows we were watching. We could relate to it. So I know he took pride in what he wore when he went out, for special occasions. But day to day, he didn't care at all. It would be embarrassing coming to school.
I can relate to that. I think my parents didn't have any kind of fashion sense, and I found it very, very embarrassing when I'd have,
to bring it to school, right?
Yeah.
Like my parents, I'm like, oh, please tell me he wore, something decent.
Yeah, a shirt that's not torn, or
Right.
yeah.
Unfortunately, both my parents were very attractive. My father, all the teachers would always comment on he looked like Billy D. Williams, and is your mom around? things like that. So it didn't matter what he wore. He had a lot of swag.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. What did you want to do when you were a kid, and then what was your trajectory going into college, and what was it that you were trying to pursue?
It was basically, I started off wanting to be a doctor.
Mm.
We were all taught, at a very young age, the most prestigious jobs were doctors and lawyers and things like that. I never wanted to be a policeman or a fireman or those things. My father worked really hard. He was a plumber. He knew how to fix things. He had auto mechanics in his background. He self-taught with all that. He was always fixing people's cars and rebuilding projects and things like that. And I knew early on I didn't want to do that. And I was very condescending about it. He would remind me that this is what pays the bills and gives us a good lifestyle. And don't turn your nose up at hard
Mm.
work. And I remember one time saying to him, he said, I'm going to teach you how to change a flat tire. And I said, well, why would I need to learn how to do that? He said, because you may have a flat tire. I said, I'm going to call somebody to come and fix the flat tire. And he hated that. He wanted to break that spirit in me because I didn't want to do those things. So I patiently sat there and, watched how to do it. But yeah, definitely medical school.
Mm.
My freshman year in college, I got a engineering scholarship, but I was still going to just do medical. But after one semester of that, I went to the guidance counselor because I wanted to be a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you what was so funny about it. This is an old reference. It was very, very popular show at the time. It was called MASH. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
familiar with it? So one of the characters would wear women's clothing because he was trying to be, say that something was wrong with him. So he would go in and sit on the psychiatrist's sofa, and somehow the hourly rate came out. And I was like, oh man, that is good. You can get $100 an hour and let somebody sit on the couch and tell you their problems. Like, I want that job. But after one semester, and I saw that it was going to take like at least like 14 years, I told my
Uh,
guidance counselor, I said, I want to get out of here in 4. What degree pays the most graduating? And at that time it was computer engineer. So I immediately switched.
okay. But you also worked in modeling for a bit, right? Was that before you went to college, or?
Yes, in high school, because by then I had gotten a reputation for being fashionable, and there was some regional contest between all the high schools for fashion, and I was nominated and I won. Then I did a local fashion show. I enjoyed that. I was, really known for my runway walk. It was different. So I did enjoy that, but it was heavily discouraged. My father's like, that's not what young men do. Let's get you focused on something else. He didn't want me distracted with that. So he was not a fan at all.
Okay, but you did well. I mean, you were successful.
I did well. And then I went into the military because, again, I was paying for school myself. My
Mm.
parents definitely believe that you won't miss class. You'll value better when it's out of your money
Yeah.
versus, and they saw this with many of their friends, how they were very nonchalant about their education. So they said, if you're serious, this is what you'll do. We're not going to mortgage the house for you to go in there and chase women all day.
Mm.
So that was important. So then the military just offered a good option. I could get my degree. I could travel the world. They would pay for my college. I would get some training. So on paper, it just sounds like a wonderful idea. So that's the
Okay.
next route I went.
What was it like in the military? You were in Italy? Was that like?
I was in Italy. I was in Air Force Intelligence,
Okay.
so that was pretty cool. Top 2% of the military. So, I've always had an elitist personality growing up.
Uh, okay.
Um, they actually sent me to the psychiatrist in the military. And the complaint was like I didn't live in a realistic world. Like my expectations from that. They didn't based on my background, they could not understand the confidence I had and just how I perceive things.
Okay.
So our TIs are they're very intimidating, but I knew going in, they couldn't hit you. They
Mm.
could yell at you. I knew that was to be expected. So it didn't bother me. Now, if you equate it to like going to jail and it's scared straight, that would be different.
Yeah.
So that's how they try to liken it to like really get you in line. But when you know that they're saying cliche things like, what are you looking at? And you say nothing. Who you calling nothing? I mean, it's just, I had heard it all before. So yeah, they had an issue with me.
Okay. Wow. All right, so you went 2 years in the armed services, and
No, I did 4 years. Day one, I knew I was gonna be 4 years and done. I knew I wasn't gonna, be a life or anything like that.
okay.
I utilized all the benefits, which were to buy a house with no money down, get a degree. I
Mhm.
only got 2 years degree while I was in the military because the schedule was very challenging, rotating hours and not a normal 9 to 5.
Right.
So it was really difficult going to school and being full time in the military.
Hmm.
It took me 10 years to get a 4 year degree, just to say it short, 10 years.
Wow. Well, talk about your journey into the fashion world, and I mean, what was your experience of the modeling world like? And was that something that you wanted to come back to later on and be part of that?
It was just fascinating to me. Now, granted, at this time period, we didn't have social media. We only
Hmm.
had magazines. There weren't a lot of publications of models that looked like me. So therefore, it was always like, could I do it?
Uh-huh.
I wanted to always fantasize about it. So my first exposure were like live fashion shows, and every fashion show I would go to, I would get booked. I came back to DC after doing a 2 year stint. I modeled while I was over in Italy because I was considered exotic.
Okay.
And now I know how that works in the modeling world everywhere.
Say more about that, like what works, yeah.
Well, so if you go to any place where 90% of the people look like they could be siblings, and then you have another 10%, everyone views that as exotic.
Hmm.
So let's say that you're in a community where everyone has dark hair and dark eyes, because most of the world has brown eyes. So when you have that pigment change, that seems more exotic. Then you have people who have naturally lighter, blonder hair, then that seems exotic. But if you go
Hmm.
to other places around the world where 80% of people have blue eyes and blonde hair, then maybe red hair is considered exotic, maybe a dark brunette. So I've learned early on that if you're not like the norm, you can be exotic and then you can do well in that fashion community because
Hmm.
everybody wants something different. It took me a long time to get that.
Okay. Okay. Did you have a positive experience when you were modeling, or were there challenges that you had to face?
Oh, most of the experiences are not positive
Hmm.
in comparison. So for like every home run, you strike out about 20 or 30 times.
Okay.
And it's difficult. So I try to, as a director, to be very sensitive to the mental health of model talent because we live in a different world. And it's the only career field I compare it to dating all the time, which is, not a good comparison, but I put it in this sense. As a gentleman, if you go out and you ask someone to date and out on a date or to dance, I remember in high school I asked people to dance and, sometimes she said yes, sometimes she says no. So when she says no and you're walking back across the gym floor, you feel a certain type of way. So in modeling, that happens. And it always comes down to you don't have the look that they want. And it's almost impossible not to take that personal.
Hmm.
So even today, I did a fashion show last night, and I saw disappointment on models coming in. Like one particular model, she's short, and they said someone said you were looking for a short model. I said, I don't know how anyone could have thought I said that because I would never say I was looking for a short model. And then I realized how they came out. So I said, well, let's. I said I had a short dress, but I don't have short models. So and she was very, I could see she was disappointed, and 'cause they get excited, they get excited about one the baller for you, which I consider honor,
Hmm.
But I have an aesthetic that I want for my brand, and I pretty much sticks to it in terms of the type of models I want, the type of look I want, and that's important. And that's important to all designers. It's not a sympathy thing; it's about marketing, branding.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
same skill set, if you're hiring an engineer, they need to have this skill set, these programming skills, or be familiar with these applications. You need that. So if you don't have those things, it's not as disappointing. You may still want the job, but it's disappointing. But when it's based on your appearance, you're too short, you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too fat, or all those things, that's really hard on the model. And I get that. So we try to be delicate in our responses.
Yeah, because you can't change those things about yourself. You can't grow a few inches, or so. But for yourself, I mean, when you were in the modeling industry, I mean, could you talk about things that maybe challenges that you faced, or ways in which you learned to become resilient, or practices that you developed there that helped you?
I didn't do it the practical way. Like most people, got some training, which I definitely value.
Hmm.
They get some professional photos, which I didn't start off with. You don't need them, but all these are assets if you have them. If you can already show the client what you could look like, that's beneficial.
Hmm.
But for some, they have the skill set to just look at a fresh face, no makeup, plain clothing, and realize that this person has supermodel potential. But it's easier to convey when you see them dressed like a supermodel and all
Hmm.
glammed up, and and they can show some variety. So that will always trump the basic Polaroid shot.
Yeah, yeah. How did you, I mean, with your experiences of like, I mean, you mentioned sort of dealing with rejections. Was that something that was difficult for you to learn how to do, or were you able to do that pretty easily, or how was your experience?
It was hard. It was hard initially because you're not having the right look. You don't know what that means. Like, are you
Hmm.
not tall enough? Are you not light enough? Are you not dark enough? You're not ethnic enough. It was a different time. I remember going on a casting call and they wanted me to change my vernacular. And I read the script and they were like, okay, now go in here. And he goes, I want you to be really, really black. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I found it very condescending.
Yeah.
And he was going in through the language. It was like very stereotypical, whatever casting or whatever. And I said, well, what time period is it? Because that's not what that community, that's not how they talk.
Hmm.
I'm as an authority, that's not regular dialogue, in any community. It's just not. So I remember that being difficult. Like you're trying to tell the director what to do and correct
Yeah.
it. That didn't go over well with my agent. But sometimes you have to give them, direction because sometimes they don't know. And it's not a
Hmm.
bias thing. It's just what they've not been exposed to it. That's the difference, you know. But it's hard. Rejection is hard. And when a lot of it is based on physical appearance, that really, really hurts, because there's nothing you can do about it,
Yeah.
but and that's what you hear. No, those are no's or no's. So you hear a lot more no's than yes. So one, it does build character and confidence. So when you do land something, you feel really, really good about it. You really can celebrate, but you learn from it because sometimes you can ask for feedback to see what is it is there anything I could have done different? And then if the answer to that is no, then you know you're not the person for that job. And you have to live with that. You have to just be okay. I'm not the person. And the
Yeah.
same thing if you're in the dating world, as I compare to dating, sometimes you're just not the other person's type. They may want a bad boy. They may want this. They may want that. And if you're not that type, you're just not that type. And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. 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 How did you get into designing? Was that something you did as a kid?
I had no aspiration to design at
Okay.
all. So most of my problems in the fashion industry have been just from an engineering background. When you have a problem, you look for a solution.
Hmm.
So when I was modeling, I wanted to model, in a bigger platform. So I started teaching at a modeling school that had the parent company elite that would come in and do the scouting once a year. So that's why I did that, and then training also helps you with your skill set. For doing a fashion show, I was working with designers and I had a designer kind of put me against the wall with demands at the very last minute. And I had to give in. And I hated that. I hated that I had to do that. So then I started designing some stuff. So I was, well, at least I will have a designer in case it doesn't work out with others. And I worked really, really hard on it. And as a result, in terms of career wise, I have surpassed all of those designers now. They come back and they all remember back in the day where we were starting off. So that was the only reason for that.
Hmm.
Creating Fashion Week, there was an opportunity for the designers in DC to have a platform to introduce themselves to the fashion community because there wasn't one here. So
Hmm.
then I created Fashion Week to do that. So everything was always a result of seeing a problem and then trying to find a resolution for it. And then it moves you to the next step.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, talk about your brands. I mean, you have, Magnum and Corjor. Talk about why those two brands, how they came about, and what they do, and what's your sort of creative vision for both of those.
Well, I first started off with Corjor, which was named after my kids, Corey and Jordan. And we tell Ryan, once he came around, the third one, that he was the last part of it, right? So he says all three, but it's Corey and Jordan. And I started off as a menswear designer. I love smoking jackets. I watched I Love Lucy, and Ricky would come home and put a smoking jacket on. And I just imagined that just felt rich. I was always intrigued with old shows like Dallas and Dynasty that showed wealth, because when you grow up watching Bewitched and Gilligan's Island and I Dream of Jeannie, Brady Bunch, none of those shows had opulence and lavish lifestyles. So when you had these other platforms that had that, you're like, wow, this is what the other part of the world lives, and it's captivating. We're today we're definitely pop culture is captivated by it. So that drew a lot of inspiration in terms of I wanted people to feel that way in my clothes. So I did men's loungewear for a while, with smoking jackets, lounging pants, and things like that. It didn't sell well. So that was a little frustrating, but people like seeing it. They love seeing the models in it, and all that, but it still has to make financial sense.
Yeah.
So what the game changer was, I did a big show with 40 pieces, and I did one female dress, and it wasn't even complete. And after the show, all of the reporters and media that came to the event all said, we must see the dress. And I remember being so heated about it, because that was not the vision. But going forward, I continue to make women's work, and that has been the most influential. I'm published in publications around the world. I get special invites to other prestigious platforms because of my work with women's wear. So, I came around.
Okay. Wow. That's quite a surprise, and I'm glad that worked out. What about Magnum? How did that come about, and why?
So this young lady in Georgetown, I remember going to her store, and I was telling her what I did. And she was telling me that, when I told her what my price points were, she go, that's good, but you have to have something that's of a lower price point. And I was trying to understand why. So in her example, she says, my low price points are postcards. Because back then people bought postcards. Can we imagine that? When the last time you bought a postcard? They bought postcards. And she said pantyhose. So she sells enough pantyhose to pay her telephone bill or something else, and enough postcards. So she says she makes sure that every person that comes in, if they don't buy a gown, they buy something, and it adds up. So since I wasn't selling wedding dresses and evening gowns every day, I needed a lower price point and a different direction. So first it was all about sensationalism. I didn't use the traditional underwear models where they would look all flat in the front and like the basic old Calvin Klein that you see in the newspaper. I took these big hunky bodies because I knew that women were the primary buyers for their husbands and boyfriends or sons' underwear. So I had to put an aesthetic that made them look. And that was a success for Calvin Klein. He pretty much put that model out there. And it took off. It was an explosion. The units were flying off. I would go to the post office, or there's the underwear man, which I hate that process. I hate mailing stuff. But yeah, it was pretty much like the bread and butter for a period of time.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. I want to ask you, a few questions about beauty, which is it a word that some people associate with fashion? What does that word mean to you when you think of the work you're doing, the work you've done? What does beauty mean in your world?
I think you have to look at it in the context of what its goal is supposed to be. So let's first deal with just the normal. Let's go from your earliest exposure to beauty is as a parent, and you have a child, and this baby comes out that really looks like an alien. They all do. They all look like this alien. But so much time and care has gone into bringing this life. And on a day-to-day basis, as your baby is changing and cooing and all these things, you see this beautiful alien, in your arms. So it changes. And everyone thinks they have the most beautiful child. They look at it and they see a reflection of themselves. And it's a piece of beauty. So that's the first exposure to beauty. I think it's great. Of course, you have superficial beauty. There's nothing real about it. It is all glammed up and like artificial, but there'll always be a place for that. There'll always be a place for it. You look at some people who, engage in plastic surgery, and they have really altered their natural look to where it's not really a a cute aesthetic, but they continue to do it. And it's because they have a false perception of what their self beauty should be.
Mm.
And I feel sorry for them. I really do, because they're destroying themselves. You can see beauty in everything if you look for it. You can see beauty in poison ivy, a daffodil, the sunset, you just through the smog, it is where you are. So
Yeah.
beauty has a lot of different qualities. This is a matter of just how you look at it.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me about like in relation to the purpose of your work, right? And the vision that you have, particularly for DC Fashion Week, but even for your brands, would you see beauty in the purpose or behind why you do what you do?
No, I wouldn't say that, because beauty has many different definitions. So what through one photographer's lens is what they may view as beautiful, the rest of the world, or even the majority of the world, may not.
Yeah.
But fashion can sell anything. They can take what most people may have been exposed to in their childhood and as adults that they would never view as beautiful. But
Mm.
because fashion has embraced it and marketed in such a way that it's beautiful. And there's examples of people with skin discolorations or gap teeth,
Yeah.
features that we normally would, if we had an option, we would suggest fixing them if we had the
Mm.
money and the resources to do it. But fashion can present it in such a way that it becomes exotic and is viewed as beautiful, and then other people want to do it. There's some people who have actually had perfectly straight teeth and chiseled them to make them have a gap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
It's
think that yes,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. I think there's some cultures where that's really
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the fashion world can distort your reality as well. But I mean, if you go along with it and it works out for you, then by all means, go for it. For
Yeah.
example, most people that would view a beauty mark now, Marilyn Monroe made it popular, but it was a little dot. It wasn't a mold like Cindy Crawford. It took fashion to make her exotic, where then other women who had imperfections on their face, they started to get work because she had laid down the foundation for it. So it changed the world's
Mm.
perception of what is beautiful. But I'm sure as a kid, she probably was ridiculed for it. And before
Mm.
her, it wasn't deemed to be a beautiful quality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
because she's
yeah.
one of the most beautiful women in the world now, and it's fashion has sold us the vision on that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting, yeah, point because I think certainly once you have somebody who's out there as a recognized model, they do shape other people's perceptions of what's beautiful. I was curious though in my question in relation to like when you set out to start DC Fashion Week, did you have a vision for what would make this event really beautiful in the sense of what would make this really worth doing? What, even when you continue to do it, do you have a vision for how you would execute this in a way that you might be proud of or that where its impact could be, something that people could judge as beautiful somehow?
I saw how demographics were important. Although I lived in Maryland, I knew that there was more power in creating a DC Fashion Week than for me, a Baltimore or one of the major cities around, or in Virginia, Pentagon City Fashion Week or those things. I knew that because of geography in DC, that would have more impact.
Mm.
We always started with saying that I wanted to use diversity to make it a global platform. And because we're home to so many different embassies and we have resources to designers around the world, it was our goal to be the Olympics of Fashion Week. We had to give a reason. Why would you do DC versus New York? Or why would you
Mm.
do DC in addition to New York? If you're already doing the world's biggest, we had to sell a different dream. And our dream was to get your country behind you. And that's important to a lot of even if it's just the ambassadors there or the cultural attaches there or one of the leading publications that's associated with their country mentions their brand, that's really huge for them, particularly when we were dealing with countries that geography is not my strong point. It still isn't. I had never heard of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. I had never heard of those places. And when we had designers come in from there and they would do really well and they would pick models, and we thought they would pick mainstream models because they were coming over from Europe, and they were like, no, we want this because we have models that look like this every day. We want something different. And
Mm.
that was surprising because when you go to the shelves and you look at all the major publications, you see one form of beauty, at least during that time period. Today it's never been a better time for diversity in the fashion world. They have
Mm.
finally caught up. and they show it in a beautiful way. You see everything now versus 10 years ago, that was clearly not the case. So they made a lot of progress.
Yeah, yeah. So that was really important to you to sort of highlight diversity and to make that possible. Because I recall you'd taken attempts to include modest fashion, for instance, as that was not something popular elsewhere. But
And that was different because, again, fortunately, I had an organization come to me represent modesty because, of course, I've seen the attire before, but I didn't know that it was modesty wear. And that
mm,
partly come from where I encourage people now today to get a history of fashion and to study. I didn't do that, so I'm a very, 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 very bad example because a lot of things you really learn that are insightful that help you.
yeah,
And I just kind of was fortunate to be at the right place at the right time and stumble across it. And when we were interested in modesty, it was a very sensitive time because we had just had 9/11.
mm,
And I remember some of the parents expressing their concerns, like, are you worried that, in their ignorance, that, we're going to be the victims of terrorists now because of if these people are here, they go, these people are
yeah.
here. And I was like, that's not the case, so it was embraced really, really well. It was different. And we did it for a number of seasons. We were the first.
Mm.
We heard later, New York Fashion Week, they announced that they were the first fashion week in the US to have it. But we had them like 4 years. Like I would post their comment and comment up under it
Yeah,
like this happened 4 years ago.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Talk about the process, right, that goes behind creating something like a fashion week. And is it super stressful, or do you see any beauty in that process too?
It is super stressful because there are a lot of moving parts to any production. And a
Mm,
lot of things can go wrong in a live production. So you have to be well prepared for that. There's always the fear of someone tripping or
yeah.
a breast popping out or pants not fitting, or there's always, a live reaction. That's always a fear, no matter how well you are
Mm,
prepared for that. So that's part of it. The other part is getting the right players involved and in the seats because we want press, we want people, they want to get exposure for
mm.
the brand and get feedback. We want influencers. Influencers, I used to frown on them back in the day but as the world changes, you have to change and be adaptable to it as well.
Mm,
Because now we all recognize the importance and impact that influencers have, so that's important. So yeah,
mm.
it's stressful in terms of wanting to get everything right. Everybody else wants everything right. And then you're dealing with the creative community and they all have big personalities.
Uh-huh.
It's very rare you come across a super humble, quiet spirit. That doesn't happen. They're
Mm.
all Jeff Gordon designers. I sometimes say that because they want it perfect as well. And my team tells me that I'm the worst of all of them.
Oh, really?
I said, but I'm organized. But it's because, as they say, because of your organization and
Mm.
your OCD, it's almost impossible because it's just too much. Just relax and trust your team. But it's like too much. So we joke about always afters. We really do. But I think it makes them stronger employees. And if they can handle me, they can handle anyone else in the
Uh,
industry.
what is your team like? I mean, do you enjoy working with them? Do you see sort of again, if we use the word beauty, do you see beauty in that collaboration with the folks you're working with?
They love fashion, which is good because you can't do it for a paycheck.
Hmm.
You can't do it
Hmm.
for a paycheck. And you're more passionate about something that you enjoy doing and being a part of the process. Then I don't have to micromanage because it's your work ethic, it's what you want to contribute to the process and what you want to see happen. That's different than someone having to do something and
Yeah.
having be a bean counter and count jelly beans or whatever. There's something that's monotonous. So they all enjoy being part of the creative process. That is great, and we're literally like family. Like after the take everybody out for dinner, we go to each other's events, whether it be somebody's baby shower or wedding, or they're getting an award for something. So we're very supportive of each other in that. And that's great. They're great. They're clearly they're considered as family and friends.
That's great. That's great. Um, when you say they love fashion, what about fashion do they love? Like, is it the ability to change the way people feel, or like what about it is worth loving?
I think they're drawn to the fashion world and the excitement that comes to it. There's something about the clicking cameras, the
Mm.
beautiful models, the fashion, the responses, all being part of the production in that process. That's exciting. It's
Mm.
still exciting to this day.
Okay.
So that part. And then they all have backgrounds. Like 3 or 4 of my members were models and expressed an interest in learning how to do more, and were able to, be promoted and become team members. But that's sometimes a challenge because this
Mm.
last season was the first time I implemented that no staff members could model.
Ah.
Either you're staff or you're a model. I don't want the lines to cross over. And that was hard for some people.
Why is that? What was the reason behind that for you?
I think that when you are working with the models, you're getting you all are, I mean, because models there, it's a click. So you're clicking
Mm.
with the models. Then when you have to be in a position of authority, it's hard for the models to make that adjustment because
Mm.
you were just, laughing it up and, with them a moment ago. And now you're telling them what they can do and what they cannot do.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always transfer well. So
Right.
I think they lose the respect of their position because they are of that association. So it's important that there's a difference between production, management, and models for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So one person decided that they rather model than be on the team, which, hurt my feelings for a moment. But I realized that the designers really love them and they have a different aesthetic and it's exciting for them. So
Yeah.
I get it.
Awesome. What is your vision or your hope going forward for DC Fashion Week? Do you have a dream for what you would like to see this become?
I do. The last Fashion Week was the absolute best, hands down. It was fantastic. We were able to do a lot more because we had some generous sponsors come on board. For
Mm.
most of the seasons, I've always been self-financed. And we'll get some sponsorships, but a lot of donations in kind and things like that. And every now and then, a big corporation like, T-Mobile or Coca-Cola will come in and do something, but they were not consistent.
Mm.
And of course, we're gracious from whether you give $200 or, $50,000. We're gracious for all of it, but it's good when it's 50,000 because we can do a lot. We can do a lot more. But because of that, we're able to give a lot. We are the highest return on the designer's investment. Like we're the lowest price major fashion week in the world.
Mm.
You can go around and check the other sites and see what they charge for registration, number of looks, and they're 5 times, 10 times higher than what we do. So we're nonprofit. Our goal is not to get it that way. It was to, and then we have the public income versus just buyers and press. The public can come in and experience it as well. And we think that's helpful. I think that part is
Ah.
helpful. And it has to cover some of the overall costs. So that's where we differ. But going forward, of course, we're going to have more community partners. Eventually, I do want it to look like an Olympics. I want the world's best designers from each country to show their work at Fashion Week. And that's a huge effort to try to do, but I think it's something that's doable.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it. I really do.
That's a beautiful vision. What led you to make it a nonprofit?
Well, I knew that as myself, I didn't have the resources available for Fashion Week as a designer for me. I mean,
Mm.
I did the calls. It was 6 figures when I first started trying to show at one of the major platforms, and I
Mm.
couldn't have gotten my then president wife, my then wife, to ever agree to anything like that. So I knew there had to be other designers in the same position, and I felt that as a nonprofit, we can negotiate lower prices on everything because our
Mm.
vision is different. Like a reason why we don't do this is because we're trying to help. We want to help designers, we want to help models, graphic designers, publication. We're here to help as a platform. So we were one of the first fashion weeks to do that. There have been several others that have embarked on the same thing. And the hope was eventually to get charitable donations for people who like fashion as well. That was eventually the hope for that to happen. But as long as people could respect us as a nonprofit and that we had a mission, then that made the price points explainable.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have any advice for folks in the modeling world or aspiring to be models, given all the challenges, given how difficult it is with rejection and so on, what advice would you have for people who are entering that domain?
I would say for them to for one study.
Hmm.
So here's a part of the study process. And I tell models this all the time. There are some very popular model websites, and they do a category ranking of the top 50 female models and the top 50 male models, or the top models in this particular category. I say, look and see who those people are. Look at their poses, look at the agencies that they're associated with, look at the work that they're trying to do. You don't have to reinvent, you know, the wheel.
Hmm.
You can take that as inspiration and incorporate that in your own style. So do the research on that part. Like, don't try to join this particular agency if they don't have any talent that looks like you,
Hmm. Hmm.
unless there's a clear need for that. So that's part of it. Um, Aim high, but be able to have realistic expectations. That's really important. And you have to ask yourself, if I get this job, how will I feel? If I don't get this job, how will I feel? And that's important. That's important for your mental health. And then, of course, and I tell them this is most important, to just simply be professional. That's what people remember. They remember your own time. They remember if you were kind.
Yeah.
They remember if you listen for feedback. They remember if you smile. Leave an impression. Leave it, and be kind to everyone, because you don't know who is going to make a reference. If you're mean to the receptionist,
Hmm.
as the casting director and someone else are talking, he or she may decide, like, well, do you really want that model? Or she can say, or he can say, what do you think of this model? And then it'll jar their memory and it will work in your favor. And I know that happened with me on several occasions. It's just a matter of just treating everyone with respect and kindness that they
Hmm.
remember. But they also remember rudeness. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. What about any advice to designers who are again trying to succeed? And
for designers, we all share some things in common. We all want to be famous designers. We all want to be celebrity designers. We want rich people wearing our clothes. We want to be in the best stores. I laugh when I watch some of the reality stars when they all come out with a brand, and the first thing they say, they would have been Neiman's and Saks and all of these prestigious retail outlets for their brand that's nowhere near the aesthetic of what the brands that are in these are. So that's a delusion in itself. So be realistic about that. But say, well, who's your customer? Who's going to buy your clothes? What do you want that impact to look like? Where do you imagine your items being at? Not where you want them, what's reasonable, where you can have them. And that will really help. That'll keep you from being disappointed. So I realized that I can use the sensationalism of Magnum underwear. So I got it trademarked. And I knew what most people would think if they heard the name Magnum. And it goes to the adage of that sex sells. So I will put these very sexy models in the Magnum underwear. And then I would go to the adult novelty stores and I did brand placement in those. So at one point I was in 5 of them and I was moving units that way, because then they go in and there wasn't a lot of underwear. The underwear in there a lot of people would normally buy. I put it that way.
yeah.
But because of the name and the branding, it did well in those stores. So that's where I aimed for. I didn't aim for Macy's, Target, or any of those things. But as of today, my first manufacturer resold my SS inventory to other places. So now it's on Amazon and Walmart of all places.
But yeah, bootlegged, right?
bootleg,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow. So yeah, it's because you set up Google alerts for your brands and stuff, and it's like, look at it, it's like, wow, I'm on Amazon. Wow, I'm in Walmart. How did that happen?
You're not getting any of that money. So.
None of the money. None of the money. But they say, is a imitation is flattery. No, I don't go for that. But it lets you know you reach a certain status,
Mm.
when that happens. Because they do it to the best of brands. There's fake Gucci everywhere. So they do it to the best of brands. So I have to look at it that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What else are you working on? I mean, you've had such a diverse range of careers and interests. Is there any other project you're juggling on top of all of this?
I am considering going back to theater
Oh, wow.
just once so that my kids can see it. I haven't done television in like a super long time. So I would like for them to see that. So I'm being offered a script for a play for early spring. So I'm going to consider it.
Okay.
So that's one thing. I'm going to continue to, of course, do fashion and decide what direction I'm going in for the new collection. So that's it. For Magnum, I've expanded to swimwear. It's going to be high-end swimwear, which we normally can't picture out what does that mean for men, high-end swimwear. So
Mm.
there is a category of men who will pay, $200, $300 for a pair of swim trunks. Most won't, but there are a group that will. So I'm catering to that particular crowd with the latest. And
Okay.
it's flashy,
Okay.
gold and metal and all those things. So I'm going to do an editorial campaign for that. I want to work with other photographers for editorials because that's always fun to see your work published. It helps with the branding, helps with the selling.
Mm.
So I'm super excited about that, and just going forward. I'm going to take a step back on producing other fashion weeks. I did a lot of fashion events this year.
Mm.
As I told some of the organizer of the event last night that this was my last fashion show this year.
Okay.
They're like, no, I said, yes, it's my last one this year. I'll go attend others, but I'm not showing or producing anymore, unless I get a call from Oprah or something.
That's great. What fuels you? I mean, you've got, yeah, I think so many different interests, but is there are there sort of a set of key drivers or motivators that you think are keep your energy up and keep you going?
It is seeing so many people's dreams fulfilled for them. So
Mm.
many from models to designers to even people who are new to journalism, and then I wrote a blog on my coverage here, and it increased my blog viewership, and I can't wait to do. As a result, I now got invited to do other things. A lot of people tell me because I did what our coverage was DC Fashion Week. We now were invited to New York Fashion Week, which of course is the Mecca. A lot of designers say that because of that, New York Fashion Week is calling me. I know they would never know who I was if we hadn't done the
Mm.
platform. So hearing those success stories, that is always great. We always want them to come back though, but but sometimes you just go on and you go on. So we understand that as well. So that's always exciting for models to get their dreams realized. There was one model, and I told her mom, I said, you absolutely have to take her to New York. There are certain faces you look at, and like it's like 1 in 20,000 that has to look. And I'm telling you, she has to look. And her mother took her to New York, and she got signed to one of the top agencies next. So we're like super duper excited for her. We had another model, and I told her that she had the perfect look for designer Calvin Klein. And she went to New York. She got signed by a New York agency, and her first client was Calvin Klein.
Nice.
So, we don't always get it right, but we're super excited when it does happen. We really are.
Yeah.
So that's the most important, the gratifying part of seeing people work hard on their dreams, and we give them a platform to kind of exercise that. And they view it as successful, and that's great because it literally changes their lives. There's nothing wrong with having a different business platform where you make the best ice cream because that
Mm.
gives people joy because we like ice cream. Does it impact the world? I don't know, but it gives us joy. So just how you view it. But we love seeing people have their dreams fulfilled because they have different backgrounds. I mean, we have designers who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are professors, and although they enjoy their 9 to 5, it's a different thing for them to follow their passion like that. So we get it and we find it exciting. We're happy for them.
Awesome. Awesome. Ian, thank you so much for taking the time, and this has been super insightful. Where can we direct our viewers, our listeners to your work?
Well, our main platform is, of course, dcfashionweek.org, and Instagram official DC Fashion Week, Facebook DC Fashion Week. My personal is Mr. DC Fashion Week. So I'm curious to hear your vision, your view of beauty. What is beauty to you?
Oh yeah. So I'd say for me it operates at various levels, right? So I think there's a fundamental sort of metaphysical beauty, like everything that exists is beautiful because it's part of existence. I think that's part of this reality's attractiveness, right? The,
Okay.
the the little things in space that draw us, that faraway galaxies and black holes, all of those things to the tiniest sort of particles, I think have an intrinsic attractiveness. But then there's also, I think there are a number of things that are beautiful have in common, and there are things like harmony and symmetry and elegance and a sense of fit, unity. It's a kind of element of surprise. So whenever we call something beautiful, it typically has some of those qualities. And I'm really interested in beauty in the work that people do. So there's certainly the
Okay.
physical beauty, right, which you're talking about in either clothing or faces, but in in the work of a designer and seeing that there's a match between whatever they're coming up with and the person who's wearing it, or the way in which something makes people feel, and the way in which clothing can convey to people a sense of confidence, right? I think there's
It can reflect your personality because we make judgments, whether we do it so intently or just organically. When we first
yeah.
see someone, we look. And most people, if you take three people and have them walk in the room and walk right back out, and you ask them to describe the people that came in, they will almost all put the same main features down for each person.
Mm.
you know and there's they now say there's a scientific way of looking at a facial shape and the space between the eyes and the nose bridge and the fullness of the lip. That there's a scientific way of examining what quote unquote a perfect face is, that
Mm.
most people will respond to positively
Right.
because it falls within this thing. But
Yeah.
then you can have someone that doesn't fall in that whatsoever at all, but because of the charming smile. Almost everyone has a beauty to them when they smile, when their faces really light up and smile, and that part is great. I sometimes I remember referring to a model as a boring pretty,
Mm.
and they wanted to know what that meant. Was That was nothing wrong with her, but it was just a boring pretty. She was pretty, but there was nothing exciting about her portfolio.
Yeah.
So if she were to do some things differently, it would come across much more positive. It wouldn't come across as
Mm.
boring, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where someone else is not deemed aesthetically as attractive, but because they have excitement in their pictures and their poses and their personality, they're stunning.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's impactful because when it comes to marketing, you can put a particular model in something and it doesn't capture anyone's attention or anything, or you can do it a different way and it makes a big difference. I'm sure you've seen this experiment they did with Payless shoes. They put it in a very ritzy area. I think it was in New York, and they put very attractive salespeople in and display, and they made it exotic. I remember I had this friend that could perfectly give a fake accent. I don't know what country it was, but it was an accent.
Uh-huh.
But he worked in Neiman's, and
Okay.
because of this fake accent that he would give, it just made him an authority on fashion. And he sold shoes, and he used to just say how he would just sell and there was one like he sells so many shoes and he sells like the most expensive pair, and he felt that part of his delivery was his fake accent. He was like,
Uh-huh.
and I can't even do it. I don't know what it's somewhere between French and Ukrainian and maybe Caribbean. And it's so
Yeah.
funny. It's
Wow.
so funny
Yeah.
because he's Southern.
Okay.
So we know he has a Southern draw. So it's hilarious.
Wow, that's yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think that's that's one of the challenges with beauty is it can be deceptive, right? You can use it to to sort of deceive people in some way, and but also the kind of unexpected aspects of beauty that you're mentioning are really important. The kind of way in which a person's personality or energy can shine through and make something not boring, right?
So what's the opposite of beauty for you then? So we've determined what we think beauty is. What's the opposite of that?
Yeah, I think it's a very broad umbrella term that I'm using. I think it has sort of very contextual aspects to it, right? So I do think we can call things ugly in ways that are so. Like for instance, when I study scientists, where they find beauty, when they talk about where they find beauty, is in either the kind of phenomena they're studying, like the stars or cells, or in
Mhm.
the insight, the understanding. Where you have a harmony between you know uh, an idea you have, a theory you have, and how reality actually turns out to be, right? And that fit, that wow, I guessed it might be like this, but to see it's actually this way, right? That kind of fit is really beautiful, or even just uncovering the hidden order or patterns is really beautiful. And you asked about ugliness; it's always about
Not
relationships.
ugliness. I didn't say ugliness. I
Right,
said
right, right, right.
opposite
Yeah, well,
of beauty.
yeah. So for me, I'm gonna call it ugliness as because that's just the literal. But I'll tell you where it lies for them is in the kind of toxic relationships in the workplace where somebody's exploiting them or harassing them or bullying them, right? So that's what they talk about. And the way we do it in our research is we ask about positive and negative emotions, right? We ask them,
Right.
tell me about, some powerful positive emotions you experience. And then they talk about beauty. We ask about powerful negative emotions. They talk about what we're calling ugliness, which is this kind of relational toxicity.
Got
So so I think, yeah, like, I mean, if you could talk about beauty as, say, justice, right? And you see relationships that are just and harmonious, or even, in society, we see a lot of injustice that we'd call ugly, and we would denounce it, and we say that's not beautiful, like the way people are being treated, or
right.
how certain structures are. But usually underlying those judgments of you want to denounce some kind of unjust structure, you're assuming that there is a kind of opposite of that, which is the just kind of order, the way things ought to be, and that's a vision of something beautiful.
Gotcha.
So I kind of, if you ask me, I mean, I'm it's hard for me to separate my own judgments from what I do as a researcher, and I'm always like, in what field do you mean? I mean, do you mean for a lawyer, or do you mean for a scientist, or so I don't know if I have my own like
But see, I think like certain words like ugliness will never have any type of positive feedback. So I
hmm
think it's different to say this is something that I'm attracted to versus this is something that I'm not attracted to.
yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah,
something that I find appealing. This is something that
yeah,
I don't find appealing. Because then
yeah,
because I don't find it attractive doesn't mean it's not attractive.
correct, yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah,
So, but not you, but when someone describes something as ugly, no one wants to see that as beautiful because
right.
you've determined that it's already this thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I think that's just you're setting the boundaries between what's beautiful and what's the opposite, right? And yeah, because I think there's a lot of things that, like you can say, like, look, this piece of music or this piece of art is beautiful. I just don't like it. But I can see the beauty. I can see how other people find it beautiful because it has symmetry or has these kinds of, harmonies or whatever, right? And you could say
Right.
that's great. It's just not for me, and that's fine.
Right. And by the same token, you've always heard people say, I don't see what's so special about this person.
Right.
So it doesn't mean they don't think the person isn't attractive. They just don't
Yeah.
see what the hype is about.
Right,
You know.
right, right, right,
And
right.
I love when a person can use their resources and tools to sell anything. It's a lesson in marketing.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and it's great. It's a science. And some people are masters of it. Like, and I think the best to do it in the game, are the Kardashians. They're masters of it. Uh, and so I find that quite impressive. Where
Yeah,
others sometimes don't want to see people constantly win. Of course, they have their shares of troubles and things like that. But sometimes when a person is winning constantly, then it automatically builds up resentment,
mm,
and then it's not beautiful to that person anymore, and that's unfortunate. That's
yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, thank you. I mean, I think it's a very generative term, and it has a lot of opens up a lot of different ways of looking at the world. I think if you look at it through the lens of beauty, and it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, but I
Right.
do think there are certain common features. There may be, maybe 11 to 25 different sort of things that we could consider beautiful. I don't think it's an infinite range of things, but
Right.
but because there's so much diversity in the things we find beautiful, I think it's possible to have some interesting conversations. But also, I think it can help people. My sense is it can help people to thrive, right? If you pay attention to what's beautiful in your work, try to look for that, and to try to work in a way that's beautiful, or to find beauty in your work. And it's not just one thing; it can be a range of things.
Right.
But you pursue those, and it can, help you to flourish and thrive in better ways.
And just the world in itself. There's a series on Netflix called like the Planet series or something like that, and it's beautiful to see how things have, I dare say the word evolve because I believe in design, but however the process is, you
Hmm.
say, you know, there was an explosion versus someone say, let there be light. The
Yeah.
explosion still happened, the light still happened. So to decide which path you want to go spiritually. But it is when you see the wonder of the world and the beauty and the complexity of just how things are from the simplest things, the ocean and animal life and butterflies, it's breathtakingly beautiful. and just how things work, from a bumblebee moving pollen from this plant to this plant, and how plants respond to this type of organism and whatever. It's just, I find it to be the most fascinating thing. And then some of the colors I wish I could duplicate, in fabric. Now there's a silk dyeing process that you can, that's kind of tedious, but it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Some of the just naturally occurring colors in nature are just beautiful, and I'm in awe of it. So
yeah. Well, that's a very I think that's one of the power of beauty is it makes us want to reproduce it, right? Like you encounter those colors and you're like, I want to be able to create that and to share that with others, right? So I think it also, my latest podcast episode, my guest talked about how he defined it was beauty as a shy peek at divinity, right? It's a kind of, there's something beyond breaking through that there can be things that you find pretty, but they're also really powerful experience of beauty that are kind of almost otherworldly and pull you out of yourself and point to something beyond, which is, I think also part of the arresting power of beauty.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, wonderful. Ian, thank you. Very grateful for you being on the show.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked that video, please hit that thumbs up button and share it with your friends. Also, please take a second to hit the subscribe button because it really helps us out. Thanks.